Greetings, this is Vane and welcome back to Let's Play Mordor, Depths of Dejenol. Okay, I was rambling about, hang on, I've got a potion I haven't idea. Okay, well we'll do that one. Yeah, I missed you. Yous are going nowhere. Get that one out. Boom. Done. There you go. Okay. I was kind of showing off companions and rambling about the origins of D&D. Because this is kind of like the history that everybody knows, to be honest. Because it was created by Gary Gygax, who based it off a miniatures war game called Chainmail that he group used to play, and basically it was medieval historical war. So basically the rules had stats for different armies, historical armies, be it Romans or in the Dark Ages, etc, etc, etc. And quite often you'd have like heroes and generals and stuff like that. So within the context, it would be like powerful characters to supplement the grunt troops. I mean, you can see something similar because Games Workshop, although they're known for fantasy and Warhammer, they actually created a version of Warhammer for historical gaming called Warhammer Ancient, I think it was called. And it's quite interesting because it's basically various historical armies, like I said, Romans, Greeks, Ottomans, in the context of the Warhammer rule set, and I think it was 3rd edition that they used for that. And basically that's where the idea for fighting men come from, which the original name for fighters, simply because, you know, any hero can pick up a sword. You don't need... That's the most kind of human thing to do for if you're going to be an adventurer, you know? You don't need a lot of specialist training. So, and in literature, it's like with the most common hero is normally some sort of kind of rogue human type thing. That's the archetype that goes with. I mean, mainly because I mean you've got a lot of not only just fantasy novels, but you also had a lot of historical adventure novels, pulp novels, things like that. And a lot of them, you would just basically have someone who would pick up a weapon and hit with it, or just slap people with their fists, then maybe more shoot or whatever, you know. fine. Not doing anything with it. And I'll feel bad. So yeah, okay, you can. There you go, here's your girdle of strength. Make that level 19, there you go. Anyway, so that's where you're fighting, man, and pretty much that's your standard. I mean, even in things like Fighting Fantasy series, for example, the original games, Warlock of Firetop Mountain, the assumption was, well, you're an adventurer. It's a hero with a sword. The Final Fantasy rules, when they were converted to a kind of multiplayer role-playing game, was literally just you roll your stats and it determines how good you are with your sword. You didn't need much else. But then, of course, you have. Oh shoot! Shouldn't have done that. Anyway, that's me not paying attention. What have we got? Don't know what that plate mail was. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at what that plate mail could have been. Probably an iron plate mail. Not that we could use here. Don't know. But yeah, what have we got? Learning, agility, or leadership. Can't have any of them because for 8 we need just under 1 million. Okay, we can do that. So yeah, so that was chainmail, and that was like the basis of Dungeons and Dragons. Gygax's contribution was that he wrote a fantasy supplement for it, which basically had a whole load of monsters and introduced, well, mages. I think it is. Well, they're magic. Originally, they were called magic users. And which naturally included a whole ton of spells. Maybe some magic items, stuff like that. The basics that you would see in very early Dungeons and Dragons games all pretty much came from that supplement. So, I mean, that in itself was fairly unique because there wasn't a lot of fantasy wargaming going on at that time. So, I mean, wargame itself wasn't particularly well known. Let's defeat one rowdy. What's that? You can now use a shimmering ring. Ooh. Why have you not got a shimmering ring? Oh, you have now. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. It was pretty unique and caused a stir. But what was important was that not so much that you had fantasy being added to war games, but then one of the scenarios that Gary Gygax did was actually to create some heroes and to have them go through a dungeon. And it was your classic mega dungeon. But it was literally a case of grab your swords, maybe a few spells for a few spell users, see how far you can get. You know, you go in, you grab the loot, you come out. And you get points based on what you manage to get out. Which would become experience. And that's how you leveled up. Now, if I'm remembering it properly, D&D was actually created alongside Dave Arneson, who at that time was actually developing a world called Blackmore, and he kind of took Gygax's supplement and had created a world where these certain events happened, and it's largely acknowledged that Dave Arneson created the first ever campaign setting, really. With the Blackmore campaign, and it's a precursor to that campaign that would become the known world for basically D&D. Okay, let's have a look now. What can we get? Agility. Or we could have might. What have we got? You know what? We've got enough agility. Let's go with might. Let's buy a tome of might. So yeah. Anyway, so Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson kind of united in a way. Put their heads together. They created TSR, or Tactical Studies Rules, and they started publishing D&D. Not going to go much into the politics because that's quite complex, and you can find books about it if it's interested. But the first thing was, and this is regarded as original D&D, is you had 3 books which came in the set. I mean, I've seen facsimiles of them, and they're quite basic because the rules hadn't been formalised. A lot of it as inspired by a lot of it, which has inspired the old school renaissance of role playing, which is basically, in most cases, it's rulings by the GM and they will roll a dice. Maybe it's D6 or whatever, but there's no kind of full codified comprehensive system. It's usually that's consistencies. Basically, you'd have the core mechanics from combat from the war game, rules on maybe running some encounters, but everything else was literally, it's down to the DM to rule it. Which meant if you're exploring in a dungeon, for example, and you come across something strange, how you dealt with it would be based entirely on your interactions with the games master, who would normally give you like a percentage chance or something to succeed at whatever you wanted to do. So you could pretend to be Errol Flynn and do somersaults, or to pull the rug out from under monsters or whatever. The options were more or less unlimited, as long as you had a GM that was flexible and open to improvisation. But what you ostensibly had was a combat simulator where the options you were given were the fighting man and the wizard, the magic user. Fighter. So yeah, I think the next book, because then it's like, oh, classic once you've got something that's hit, and it was a hit. It spread from Wisconsin in America to the UK, and that was mostly because it was picked up by Games Workshop, which at the time was Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson. So before they were even around doing Warhammer and everything that they're famous for now, Games Workshop was basically the UK outlet for D&D up until TSR UK was made. So anything else new we can use now that we've got strength of, what is it, 10, strength of 10. Oh, we can have an oak staff. I think we will. Thinking about it. Bit of a boost there. Padded leather armor. Yeah. leather cap, leather gloves, cloak, bronze braces we can use now. So we've got leather girdle, leather boots, boots of swiftness. Can't afford them, but they're worthwhile. Shimmering ring. Can't really afford you. It's not bad. That tome might really kind of helped us out there. Wow, is it really been 21 minutes? Barely even started, you know, on the history of D&D. Oh, not OD&D. Yeah. So, basically, you had the first book. They released another book, which was essentially more rules for D&D. And one of the things they introduced in that one was they introduced the thief class, which was basically a dex-based hero that had the ability to deal with traps and treasure because the switch into a dungeon meant that, you know, you needed someone who could deal with traps. And under the rules, it used to be, okay, dealing with traps would be the purview of the DM. So, and it would be a case of, okay, have you got the tools? Can you roll to look? Can you roll under such and such to disarm the trap? And it used to be very ad hoc. But with the fight with the thief, they added in skills, thief skills in particular, they were called, which were basically percentage chances to do things like hear noises, deal with traps, climb walls, that sort of thing. And it was kind of the first time they were ever sort of really properly codified. But because it was done for the thief, they became features of the thief class. At the same time, one of the special abilities that thieves would get would be the backstab. Just basically, if they could sneak around behind an enemy, they could attack and deal extra damage. And what ended up happening is that they would become, if you wanted to deal damage, the thieves could often end up outpacing the fighting men. They weren't as tough, but the other thing about thieves is they often, in D&D, they had a ridiculously low need for experience. I mean, there was like, thieves were the fastest characters to level up. Still not quite as survivable as fighting men, but between their low experience and their special abilities, and basically being a slightly weaker fighter in terms of what experience they could have, they were your classic lightly armed swashbucklers type heroes in many ways. Basically, okay. Tome of agility. Identify tome. Okay. Yeah, we'll come down here, but I don't think I can afford anything now. I've got the tome. It's the boots of swiftness. Needs 400. Shimmering ring. It's 100, which is 160. Okay. So yeah. What would happen? Well, wasn't it? Basically, rogues would often thieves would often outshine fighters, but they were being dexterity based. I mean, they had the highest armor class, they moved the fastest, and basically a lot of their skills were based on dexterity. So for them, with the inclusion of thieves, dexterity kind of became the uber stat. And inadvertently, kind of thieves became sort of power characters. So, and in many systems, they kind of, as the skill-based user, you basically you had what was often the trifecta, and you can see this in Morrowind, for example, and Skyrim and whatnot. Where you'd have characters basically split into three. I mean, previously they'd been split into two. So you'd have basically warriors and you'd have magic users. So it's literally, could you use magic or not? With the inclusion of the thief, that became basically, did you have skills, which basically meant traps. Whether you were good at fighting or whether you were good at magic. So in the next one, I think it was the next one, maybe next two, you had basically the cleric came along, and that was your warrior priest. And what that was basically, they were your healer. They specialised in healing magic. They had their own set of magic, but they could also wear armour, so they were a cross between a warrior and a wizard. Which was always going to be quite popular, because you're always going to get the characters that want to do everything, you know. And so that's essentially what the cleric was, and how the cleric often ended up being a power character. I mean, in the early versions, in OD&D for example, the cleric didn't start off with spell power. At first level, the cleric was literally just someone who could fight, but they had that was where the fighter restrictions, the weapon restrictions for clerics came in. Try and sort of balance them out a bit, so they couldn't use all the best weapons. Even though the motivation's a bit weird. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, they don't like to shed blood, you know, because you can either chop someone's arm off, you know, or you can cave in their skull. You know, which one's more brutal? But it's okay because they're pacifists. You know, these crusading knights, that were largely based on the Knight Templars in theme. That would be where the division between arcane and divine magic would first start appearing. Because really, although few people like playing a cleric, because they don't really like not many people enjoy not being in the thick of battle or having to run around and play nursemaid to other characters. Being the wandering medic. I mean, some people enjoy it. But generally not a lot of people do, because it involves a bit more thinking and about how you, like what you do with your powers and stuff like that. And most of the effects aren't that flashy. Whereas with a wizard, you know, you get spells like lightning bolt and fireball at higher levels, so you have the ability to look impressive and go boom with powers, basically. The later in OD&D, you'd get pretty much more of the same monsters and stuff like that. There'd be various other classes done, but that was pretty much it for OD&D. You had your 4 classes. I don't recall if original D&D actually had different races. I think it did, but races were very, very minimal, so it didn't affect a lot. And you basically had your classic elf, human, elf, and dwarf, and then your halfling, which was essentially a hobbit at that point, thanks to Tolkien, would be added in later, I think it was alongside the thief. So this was all around the 1979. I mean, it's before I was born, so I don't actively remember any of that. This is all like stuff I've read, but yeah. Alright, so that would be when D&D first come to the UK. Before the advent of AD&D and D&D, which was basically created by a split between Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, which basically created 2 separate systems. which was kind of confusing. Okay. Well, I think if I'm carrying on this ramble of the history of D&D, which this has sort of evolved into, and then I'll probably carry on in the next episode. I don't think you can use that, can you? No. Cannot use this item, okay. That's all I've got to get if I want to upgrade my boots to boots of swiftness. Which I still haven't got enough for. But it does give me a bonus in to dexterities, which is pretty cool. Okay, yeah. So this is Vane playing Mordor Depths of Dejenol and waffling on about OD&D, because just so you can get some idea of what's going on in this game, because we still haven't got to that yet. God, I know how to waffle. Anyway, like I said, this is Vane doing Let's Play Mordor Depths of Dejenol. If you like what you're seeing here, be sure to like, subscribe, share and comment. Please consider sponsoring me on Patreon, and until next time, goodbye.